Hello, Gary. This is the new webinar for Startups Innovation. Thanks for being here today. Gary, Jinks is the South Valley Angel. So you're the board member of South Valley Angel, right?
Yes.
Founder, managing director, and chairman of the board, the GLJ Group, innovator, mentor, and accelerator. And you're going to talk about this in a minute to the audience. You're a product development and the realization and commercialization expert. And I've seen you in action. You're also a startup ecosystem expert from the Silicon Valley up to the Middle East. And today you're going to talk to us about all of this and a broad range of topics going through from developing ecosystem, dynamic ecosystem, to the fundamentals of the startups, to your work in the Middle East, and also talk about several technologies, what's hot today, what you're seeing over there in the Silicon Valley and elsewhere. And I think it's going to be a very insightful webinar. So thank you very much for being here today with us. So I think we can move to the next slide.
All right.
Thank you, Gary. Welcome here.
All right. Thanks, Alistair.
So can you tell us a bit about, the South Valley Angels, what it is, GLJ Group, and go through your presentation with us?
Sure, not a problem.
Thank you.
So thanks for having me on today. So South Valley Angels is a pretty traditional angel investment group. It's a network of private investors. We meet once a month, kind of in a Shark Tank kind of a deal. We listen to 3 companies, they come in and pitch, and then we decide what we want to do from there. So I started South Valley Angels almost 5 years ago. We've invested in multiple companies during that time. So I kind of jokingly say that's my night job. So I founded it. I'm the founder, managing director, chairman of the board, janitor, whatever else needs to be done. So that's kind of how that works. Now my day job is GLJ Group. So GLJ Group I started GLJ Group at the end of 2004. And back then it was primarily focused on new business capture. A lot of times working with companies. I did a lot of work with military and government groups and things like that. So during that window, I was doing new business development, proposal writing, capturing businesses for client. Then in 2010, as the economy was going upside down and none of my clients were hiring me anymore, I went back to what's always happening here in the Silicon Valley, which is startups. So since 2010, I've been 100% focused on launching startups, building ecosystems, and working with the various different investor accelerators, incubators, and so forth here in the Silicon Valley.
Great.
So a little bit about my background. So my whole career has been based around getting ideas off the ground. When I got out of the Army in 2000, let's see, when was that? 1981. I went to work for a major defense contractor, and spent the first 20 years working on the tech side, systems engineering, and these kind of things. So I've developed a little bit over about 25 combat vehicles, a lot of night vision technology, and a lot of stealth technology that the military uses. And then 1998, I left that and went on to the startup side. That's when I actually went to my first startup. And that's kind of how I got introduced to this. So since 2010 and stuff, I've worked with over 150 startups. I've mentored over 30 global companies. Last year, I launched 73 startups.
Oh, wow.
In my new business capture from 2005 to 2012, I captured a little bit over 350 million in new business for my clients. In fact, from 2005 to 2012, I only lost 1 proposal.
On the startup side, right?
So yeah, that's a pretty good rate.
Yep, on the startup side, correct?
Yeah. No. These were large-scale corporate proposals.
Okay.
Yeah, no, this is still mail on that side. Now, what I do a lot here locally, besides doing workshops up and down the valley and working with a lot of the incubators and so forth, is I mentor with Santa Clara University. I mentor with Draper University, Arizona State, College of San Mateo, and pretty much work with most of the incubators, accelerators, and various investment groups in the valley. So I'm pretty well connected from that side. The training programs that I put together have been adopted around the world by incubators, accelerators here in the Valley, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, some other countries. And so we'll talk about that in a few minutes. In fact, one of the things I just did recently was to launch the first corporate innovation center in Saudi Arabia, which I did for STC, which is Saudi Telecom. They're an $85 billion company. They pretty much own the telecom business in Middle East, North Africa region. They've got competitors, but they're probably the biggest. So it's kind of nice starting that with them because they're not in oil. So it became very visible across the country and across the region.
Yep, I'm very interested to hear about this.
Yeah, so let's go with that. So a couple things that went on there is, so you'll see here there's a picture of me sitting on stage. Since I was there, they had a competition that was coming into town while I was there, which is called Get in the Ring, which has 80 countries that participate in it. It's a competition for entrepreneurs. Eventually, they work themselves up to first place. They get $250,000 in free funding, and then they get a variety of things that come along with that. So since I was over there, I came on board as a judge to judge the semifinal rounds for the Get in the Ring.
So how did you end up there?
In Saudi Arabia?
Just how did you,
okay.
Did they find you?
Yeah, they did. They found me. So a gentleman, my partner, who has a consulting company in Saudi Arabia called Lamarca, they do large corporate consulting like the Big Five, operational efficiency, strategic planning. Now they've added a bullet called innovation. And so they came over here knowing that there was going to be money to be made in this arena, and they wanted to figure out how to be part of it. So they came to the Silicon Valley for about 3 months and went to every single meetup, everything that could possibly see in the Valley. And one of those was my workshop. They came to my workshop and said, "You're the guy. Don't need to go any farther. This is what we're going to do. You're the guy we want." So they brought me on board. January, I went over there, helped them operationally roll the incubator out. We then brought in the first batch of companies. I applied my training programs to them. We trained them, got them out, got them down the road, and so that was the first batch. I'm going to go back again maybe in August to help them down select for the next round, and then we're going to do the next batch of courses in September and October. Now, along with that, we just put a proposal into Qatar Development Bank, QDB, to do the same thing for Qatar, to roll out a program and ecosystem over there for them as well. And there's a good chance we're getting an RFP right now from the SME, which is the Saudi Ministry of Economics, and they're going to send this RFP, and we'll bid with them and probably do some work right there. So there's a lot of activity going on in that region.
Yep, I'm hearing over there, as you mentioned, there's a lot of activity, and I think they're doing a great job at taking those opportunities and developing the economy and shifting, changing really things and adapting really quick, right?
They are. In fact, they just released a document that's a pretty interesting read for anybody who wants to take a look at it. It's called the Saudi Vision 2030. It was released in April, and because of that, now everybody's done one. Qatar did a Qatar 2030. Dubai's doing a Dubai 2030. Emirates are doing it. So they're all following least. And fundamentally, if you read that, it basically says that Saudi Arabia plans on changing their entire country between now and 2030.
Yep. And do you know what's driving this?
Absolutely. Everybody knows in the business world, you can't have all your eggs in one basket, right?
Yep.
Their eggs are all in the oil basket.
Yep.
Which is still going to be a pretty profitable basket for them for a long time. But they recognize they have to get out of there. They also recognize that there's fundamental cultural and social change that needs to happen within Saudi Arabia to get on par with if they want to be one of the world players. So they're going to sell 5% of Aramco, which is considered the Saudi jewels, so to speak. So they're going to sell 5% of Aramco for $1 trillion. So it'll be the largest publicly traded company instantly. It'll be 5 times bigger than Google, Apple, and Exxon combined.
Oh, wow.
So that's how they're going to fund it, but they're going to change everything. They want to change the way the people give the people things to do. They want to address employment. They want to address all aspects to it. They really want to move to a more westernized, open global society is what they're trying to do. So we'll see. In fact, I noticed you got the picture here of the, that's actually a picture of the financial district in Riyadh.
Yep.
It's still in the process of being built, so it's not quite where that picture is yet, but it's pretty close.
Okay.
So there's a lot going on over there. It's pretty exciting. we'll see what we can do. Maybe we can get enough people doing startups and moving out that they decide to just go ahead and do startups instead of joining the other opportunities they have out there, which aren't very pretty.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, Gary, that must be exciting, and indeed, I think they have absolutely the right guy there.
yeah, we're doing pretty good. I think we're going to get it. We eventually want LaMarca to be 1-800-INNOVATION. Anybody in that region of the world that has any questions about innovation, startups, funding, investors, ecosystem, whatever it is, we don't have to just call LaMarca and then we'll jump on board and we'll have people there and we'll address it for them.
That's excellent.
That's the plan. All right, so now let's get down to some of the meat. We got some of the background. So as most people know, innovation is going mainstream and it's gone global. Virtually every country in the world has some form of a co-work space, an incubator, an accelerator, or something like that. Now, they're not all working very well, but they've all at least tried to do it. So you can see here on the map, you can see that there's a pretty good spread around the globe of where all this is. So it's truly become global. And being an entrepreneur has now become an accepted career path. It wasn't just as little as 5 or 6 years ago. The only people that did this were the crazy people in the Silicon Valley. Now pretty much everybody's moved and they recognize it, and it's become a global business that's now accepted as a career path.
And then, so I have a question on the prior slide. So
sure.
I have this impression, I don't know if you see the same thing, that everyone is starting to become an entrepreneur. Universities, they teach their students to become entrepreneurs, and it's like if we are entering the era of entrepreneurship or intrapreneurship. Even big corporations now are trying to build this mentality within their walls. What's going on there? Is it really the era of the entrepreneurship?
Absolutely. Like I say, it used to be these crazy people in the Silicon Valley. Then it kind of slowly spread out. Now it's global. Everybody recognizes it. So 10 years ago, if my daughters would have come up and said, "Hey, I'm not going to go to college. I'm going to launch a startup."
Yep.
No way. You go to college, then you can do what you want. And now people are saying, "I'm going to launch a startup," and the parents are accepting that. So absolutely, it's in fact, I believe that the statistics in the United States, over 40% of by 2020, 40% of the employed will be independent.
Oh, that's interesting.
Huge number. So everybody says it's moving that way, and I believe that as my, like I say on my website, I believe that the future of innovation will be driven by private investment through shared risk ecosystems and global teams. So I absolutely believe that. And if you take a look what's happening in the big picture, companies aren't developing as much technology as they used to. I mean, they still do their core technology development, but in many cases now they go out and buy startups to get the technology. They don't necessarily develop it in-house.
Yep. And so what I believe kind of is, the innovation is accelerating so much because all those innovative ecosystems, are accelerating, getting better and better, and it's easier to build a startup than it was, years ago.
Sure.
So with all of this happening, the competition seems to increase also for corporations. People have now also a choice, working for a corporation or building a startup. So I think, there's a need of having people be more competitive, think more like an entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. I think the other thing you're looking at there is that you're right. So it's kind of a good news, bad news. Bad news is that there's more entrepreneurs than there has ever been before. So the competition is much more fierce than it used to be. However, the good news is there's more ways to get money than there ever has been before too. So it's kind of washes out a little bit. So it's a great time to be an entrepreneur.
Yep.
So now, like I say, let's get down and let's break down a little bit of this. Let's do a little bit of history of kind of how this ecosystem around the world sort of started. So the Silicon Valley is the benchmark for innovation ecosystems. Been doing it since the 70s. So let's start off with a little definition of what Webster says an ecosystem is. So the dictionary says an ecosystem is a community together with its environment functioning as a unit. So that's nice. So a lot of people try to do that. But why has the Silicon Valley become really good at it? Because they have learned how to incubate ideas, fund it, and then commercialize it. They've got that down to a science. And they know exactly how to do it, what'll work, what won't work, and how to connect the dots so that it does work. And that's a big deal. So that's what makes them function. So now let's take a look at what is an innovation ecosystem. So this is my take on what I consider an innovation ecosystem. And there's key components. In the center of this, you've got the incubator, the accelerator, or the innovation center, whatever you want to call it, but it's the location that houses the startups. It's the center of the activity, so to speak. So that'd be your classic, Y Combinator, 500 startups, plug and play, any of these kind of things. So you've got this. It could also be a corporate innovation center as well. So you've got this location where all the startups are at. This is where the synergy happens. This is where all the good stuff goes on. Now, outside of that is a ring of things that allow you to be successful as an ecosystem. If all you have is an incubator, you're probably not going to be successful. You'll have a lot of people sitting in a room, and it feels like a co-work space. So the one thing you have to make it work is you have to have investors. If there's no investors, then there's nobody to pay for all these great ideas that are in the incubator. So at bare minimum, you have to have investors. The second thing that you probably have to make it work is what I call a community of mentors and leaders. And these are subject matter experts that can help work with the young entrepreneurs to understand how to do it and how to do it right and make it happen. If you have just the incubator, accelerator, the investors, and the community of mentors, you can absolutely be successful in an ecosystem. The next pieces of these just add a better likelihood of success for the ecosystem. One is schools. The university is where a lot of ideas come out of. A lot of the students come out of college with their ideas. They go to an accelerator and they do this. So it's nice to have local universities that are feeding deal flow and entrepreneurs to you. The next piece of the pie that's really could make a big difference is having resources, research and development, CPAs, people that can code, these resources so that they work with it. So for example, if you're building a hardware product and you need to get that prototype built or get some testing done, then these resources there might be a manufacturer within this accelerator's list that you can go to and say, yeah, we could do that. We could build your prototype. We could do the testing. And we'll do it at no cost, but we want to be the manufacturer of that product when it rolls out the door. So you sign an agreement with them that for whatever they work with you, they get to be the manufacturer when it's done. So they instantly get business out of it. Right now what happens in that environment is everybody goes out and does marketing in hopes that they get business out of their marketing. In this case, they can work directly with a startup, make them successful, and know that the money they spend is actually going to come back. Where when you do marketing and advertising, it's like playing poker. That money you spent may get you business, but it may not. You don't know until it's over. So this is a method to be able to add to their portfolios of their marketing budget to be able to help that. So these are resources that are along that help it. And they normally get on board, like I said, to get in early and then stay with the company as they grow to be large. Now, the other two happen to deal with cities, the city and a chamber of commerce that's local. Those aren't as critical, but if your city buys into what you're doing and the local chamber is supporting you, you'll also need to be successful. So in order of importance, you got to have investors, then the community, and the rest of them just add a little bit of cushion to it to ensure that you can truly be successful. So that's how I define an ecosystem, is to make all those things work and work together. So I refer to this as shared risk. Everybody shares the risk here. Nobody's getting paid for what they do at this time at top dollar.
Okay.
Okay. So now let's take a look at there. So there's different types of accelerator and innovation center models. We'll start with the most popular one, and that's the investor model. Here in the Silicon Valley, that's the primary model here, which means what they're looking to do is put a bunch of startups in one place and sort of like shooting fish in a barrel. I don't want to run down the street and find a good startup. Let's put 300 of them in one building, and then I can look around and find the 3 that I like, and I'll focus on them. So because of this, they're looking for the next Google. They're looking for the next unicorn. They're looking for a home run. So in those particular cases, you've got to be a large company to invest in it. It's all about investors' return. The next one that happens frequently is what's called a real estate model. Those generally work with co-work spaces, but they do, what that is about get a building, put a lot of people in it, make your money off the rent. It probably also ties to an investor model in most cases, but that's the other models. And then, of course, the one that's really catching on now is the corporate innovation centers. Almost all Fortune 500 companies now have a corporate innovation center. Now, where these are nice is if you have a product that you know specifically Sony might be interested in, then you can go to the Sony Innovation Center, contact them, tell them, hey, here's what I got. They can fund you, they can bring you in, they can work with you, and then ultimately they'd probably buy you. So that's how that model works there. Now, in this case, the Corporate Innovation Center is focused on strictly whatever their core strength is. So on Sony, it would probably be electronics and entertainment. Okay? So you have to find the corporate that's aligned to what you're trying to do. Now, the last one I put on the list is what I call the economic development model. This is the one that GLJ Group promotes whenever we go. And what that says is that everyone contributes and everyone shares. It's focused 100% on success rate, not unicorns and home runs. So it provides a more balanced portfolio. So what this really says, here in the Valley, we have what's called lifestyle business. So let's say you have a business that could be highly profitable, nice margins, but it's only a $20, $30 million a year business. In the Silicon Valley investor model, that's not investable. It's a lifestyle business. It's not a home run. It's not Google. But in most of these other places I'm working, that's still a very investable model. You could easily get 3, 4, 5 times return on your investment as an angel investor. It's a nice business. It creates jobs and has economic growth. So that's there. So instead of what everybody talks about, well, 9 out of 10 fail. That's why we go for the home run. We're the other way around. We want 9 out of 10 to be successful. Well, everybody gets equal focus. Everybody gets the mentoring necessary to be successful. Now, will they all be successful? Absolutely not. But the idea is to focus and give everybody an opportunity so they can at least grow and maybe be a business and hire 20 people and create economic development. So that's the one that we're really looking for. So the key to that one is it's still investor driven, because investor money is that's the fuel that causes it to work. But it's really focused around job creation and economic growth. So those are the fundamental different models.
Thank you.
As a startup, what you want to be careful of, if you go into an incubator that's based on the investor model, you've got to be careful which one you choose. So the really good ones here in the Valley are like 500 Startups and Y Combinator. They do a very good job on focusing on all the entrepreneurs in there. A lot of them, like I said, they focus on the 3 good ones, and the rest of you could just go curl up in the corner and die. They don't really care. They're going to take their 5%. You're going to leave, and everybody does their thing. So be careful when you go into them to ensure that you're going to get an equal opportunity to succeed. They're not all created equal.
And then, Gary, what would be the failure or success factors for corporate innovation center, for instance? I know many corporations are trying to develop this, but it's not easy because it sort of hits the cultural shock.
Absolutely.
What's your thoughts on there?
Sure. One of the key things you're looking at there from the corporate, what the corporates are looking for is speed to market. So they're trying to ensure that they can get to market fast with the products. So rather than spending 5 or 6 or 7 years developing it, they want to do it in months. So that's their main reason to do it is, why start from ground zero if an entrepreneur has already figured 3/4 of it out?
Okay.
So that's kind of what we're looking for there. That's their main reason, is to stay a competitive advantage against their competitors, but do that by working with entrepreneurs that can speed it to market. So that's their primary focus for that. And there's several companies that have very, very good. Walmart's been successful. Staples has been very successful in doing this. There's a variety of companies that have done a really good job of getting out of there. And it's kind of all over the map a little bit on what makes those folks successful. So, for example, I believe Staples here. Let me look at this real quick. So Staples developed a digital wallet in 9 weeks, which was considered way faster than they could have ever done in-house. It was hands down a success. AT&T, Walmart, they've done the same thing. So in 9 months, Walmart, with a handful of employees, they created a search tool that gave them a 20% in online conversions.
And so
that's what they're looking for.
So for an entrepreneur, he has different options for funding, right? So he has
Absolutely.
the Corporate Innovation Center.
Yep.
Versus the business angels, the investors, the venture capitalists, even crowdfunding. So,
Yep.
Are there any major differences between going one route versus another? The corporate innovation center versus the venture capitalist, for instance, if we just...
Yeah, so the difference being when you go to a corporate center, you're kind of locked into that corporate with the intent that that corporate's probably going to buy you, or the corporate wouldn't have got involved. So it's a little more direct. You can take you right straight to the exit. When you go to the traditional angel VC round, it's pretty standard. It's very global. It's very broad. Again, you want to find ones that work with you. Now, where the difference starts arising is when you get into the crowdfunding. And there's two types of crowdfunding. You got crowdfunding such as Kickstarter, Tilt, Indiegogo, and there's probably 300-400 of those kind of companies out now, websites. And so those are based on non-equity. They tend to be focused more on consumer-based hardware products, or they're most successful in those. So if you want to go that route and you're consumer-based hardware product, great. That's probably a good way to go. If you're a software, B2B enterprise solution or something else, probably not the way to go. Now, the other side of crowdfunding is crowdfunding that's done with investors, such as AngelNet, EquityNet. Again, there's several hundred of these sites out there now, but AngelList and EquityNet tend to be two of the bigger ones that have been around for a while. What you do there is you load your product and you load your idea in there. Investors look at it, they say, hey, I like it. What you have to be careful there is to set your levels right, because you'll get a lot of investors that'll want to come in and invest $500 or $1,000. So now let's say you go and take $50,000 at $1,000 a piece.
Yep.
Now you got 50,000 people on your cap table. Now, if you want to come out and get some VC funding on the next round, never happen. You've messed up your entire corporate cap table, and there's no VC going to touch you. There's too many players.
Yep.
So if you go into that, be careful not to get too many. Now, if you can set it in most of those, you can say, I'm going to set only investments of 25,000 or more. Then you can get 2 investments, get your 50K, and still have a salvageable cap table for VC funding.
Yep. That's a good advice. Yep.
Yeah, so there's a variety of ways to do that. Like all of them, you want to have a strategy and understand what you're doing before you get there.
Yep.
Okay, so now let's get down to some core basics. One of the problems I find working in Silicon Valley with entrepreneurs is most entrepreneurs don't understand what I call the startup business model. What everybody understands is the business model we were taught in school. Okay, so let's work down and understand it. You got to understand that from a core aspect, or you won't be successful. So let's look at the traditional model. We all know that one. It's been happening for 2,000 years. We learned it in school. Now that one is primarily based on having debt. It's debt funded. So you own the whole company. It's all up to you. You grow as fast as you can until you can borrow a little money. Then you grow a little more, and then you borrow some more. You grow some more. You get a line of credit. You grow some more. And eventually 10, 15 years down the road, you have a nice, successful company. Okay, traditional model. Geared on, you have complete control and debt funded. The next model is the franchise model. You're going to go and you're going to buy an infrastructure and you're going to buy branding. So all you got to make sure is you wear the hat, follow the checklist, what you're supposed to do, and you'll probably be successful. All the marketing's being done for you, the branding's done, the infrastructure in place, the logistics, supply chain, it's all there. Just follow the list and you're in good shape. And that brings us now to the third model, the startup model. So why is the startup model so different? Many people say, well, the traditional model and startup model are the same, but they are not. So what happens is if you try to apply traditional business model to a startup, you will fail. And here's why. So there's fundamental things to keep in mind that make the startup model uniquely different. And you have to maintain these or, again, you won't survive. One, it's based on fast, explosive growth through private investment and equity share, not long-term growth through debt like a traditional model. It's all about doing it now, doing it fast, and moving out. It also has this thing called an investor exit, which is unique to this. And that's normally the investor is looking for a short-term return, somewhere in the 3 to 8 years. That's going to be 93% of the time that's through an acquisition. 7% of the time it's through an IPO. So those two things make it uniquely different. The other thing that makes it different on that exit is the investor wanting 10 times return on investment. That's a lot of money. So if an investor gives you $500,000, he's looking for $5 million back. Now, the reality is on the angel level, the average angel gets about a 3.7 return on investment. Nobody really gets the 10 times. The VCs have to get the 10 times because they're playing with big money. So that's the industry goal, is 10 times. So your objective is always to get the investor his 10 times return on investment. So if you can return the investor his 10 times, then you probably did most everything right, and you're probably successful. If you can't give him his money back, then there's probably a problem.
Yeah.
So those are key. Now, what are the challenges of this model? One is control. At the beginning, as an entrepreneur, you own 100% of your company. On average, when you exit with your company as a CEO, you're going to own probably between 15 and 17% of your company. So through this process, you're going to give away most of your company because that's the money you have, and that's the shared risk that everybody's buying into. The next thing is a challenge is building a team. In the traditional model, you only do what you can afford. In the startup, you're trying to do things probably before you can afford them. So how do you build the team? And everybody wants the best team. How do you get the best team when you can't pay them? It's hard to get them, and it's hard to keep them. And then the other thing is getting funded, which is actually difficult in any business. But getting funded in this can be a little trickier because people are trying to do it without putting up collateral, like their house or their firstborn or whatever the case may be. So it's a little different. So some of the challenges. But what are the benefits of this model? The advantage of this model is you tell me as an investor, hey, I need 500K. I'll go, great, here's 500K. Go do what you said. So tomorrow morning, you wake up with a fully funded budget. There is no dial a little here, get a little, grow slowly. How much do you need? Give it to me, boom. Because of this, you get that explosive growth. That makes sense? So that's the real challenges of this. Then we get to the question that we talked earlier. Can you scale rapidly and grow quickly to $100 million? That is the question that the investor model will ask.
Yeah.
Because if you can't do that, you're not fundable. But if you can get in an environment with an economic development model, then that question goes away. The real question becomes, can you be profitable enough to give me my money back?
Yep.
Question. Okay. So those are real different. Really. Go ahead. Yeah.
The line cut a little bit. Can you maybe repeat the last phrase you said? I think we got cut there.
Oh, sure. So what we're looking for is the economic development model doesn't have to answer the $100 million question. It just has to show that it can be profitable and get the return back. That's the key thing.
Okay. Thanks.
So now let's look at some fundamental philosophical startup basics. I've always liked this definition by Lean Startup. A startup is a human institution designed to deliver a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty. And I would add to that, quickly. Not just do it, but do it quickly. Yep. Now, if you remember when we talked about an ecosystem, we explained that an ecosystem is a community together with its environment functioning as a unit. Lean Startup says a startup is a human institution. There's your community. And the reason for that is because you're bringing investors, partners, all these various folks in to make it happen. So it's more about building that community to take the idea forward.
And when you say Lean Startup, you're talking about the book from Eric Ries.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I've always liked that definition. I thought it was a good one. I just felt he missed the idea about quickly.
Yeah.
But that's his. I've always liked that one. The next thing we touched on earlier, the resources available to an entrepreneur right now are growing and compounding at an amazing rate. The ability to get funding, the ability to find ecosystems, find collaborators, and all these things are growing rapidly. So like I said, it's a really good time. The resources are all there to make you successful. Another thing I want entrepreneurs to focus on is what you're doing more than anything is you're selling a vision. Because normally your product doesn't exist yet. You have no customers. You have no proof. So you're selling a vision. So it is critical for you to do that. And my approach is, my training approach is geared around your vision. So I would like all you entrepreneurs listening to fill in this sentence. The future of blank is blank. So the future of whatever you're doing is what? So if we go to the classic Steve Jobs, his classic quote was, the future of music will be whatever you want, anywhere, anytime, and in your pocket.
Yeah.
Which is a big deal back in the days when we all had turntables.
Yeah.
You know, and see, oh, by the way, how are we going to do that? It's called an iPod.
Yep.
You want to say a thing. The future of whatever it is you're doing is going to be what? And then that vision will tie to how you see the opportunity. It will tie to how you see yourself in the competitive marketplace. And hopefully that view and vision will be unique to you.
Yep.
Okay. The next thing is that most startups are acquired. So you probably want to go in with an acquisition strategy. That doesn't mean you can't change to IPO or something later, but you want to start with an acquisition strategy, which is you want to minimize your organization. So I worked with a startup the other day who finished his cost model. I looked at it. By year 5, he had 147 employees. And I said, so are you starting a company or are you building a dynasty? If you're going to get acquired, you don't need but a minimum amount of people to get the idea down the road and then get acquired. So the strategy. So keep that in mind. Okay. Now, there are 2 distinct phases in the startup world. The first one I call incubate the idea. Now, this consists of a variety of things. So to get out of this phase, you have to understand the customer. Today, the industry standard is a lean canvas. But the idea is you need to understand the customer so you can build the product that they want. Now, the reality is 99% of startups build a product and then try to convince everybody that somebody wants it. But that's the nature of the beast. There's what looks good in a book, and there's what happens in the real world. Yep. Okay. So the first thing is to understand the customer. The next thing is you have to build an MVP, a minimally viable product, which is a software term here in the Valley, which is equivalent to a hardware prototype. That means it functionally does what it's supposed to, but it doesn't have all the features it's going to. So if I've got a photo sharing app, I should at least be able to take a picture, upload it, and share it. Now, there may be a whole bunch of features that are going to come later. They're going to make me impressive, but it has to be able to do that. So that's your MVP. The next thing you have to do is you have to have a plan. You have to know what you're going to go do. The next thing you have to know is what it's going to cost to execute that plan. And then the final thing, you have to be able to communicate it intelligently to somebody who's willing to listen, like a partner, a teammate, an investor. So once you can do those things, you're done with that phase. Then you're going to go to the second phase, which I call accelerate the company, which is fundamentally go to market. In that phase, you need to get funded because it's going to cost a lot of money to do this. The next thing you have to do is of this phase is to validate that you have the right product that everybody wants, which means you're going to get an early adopter program. People are going to use it. They're going to give you feedback for 12 months. You're going to tweak all that together and say, perfect. Now I've got all my features and I have the product everybody wants. The next thing you want to do in that phase is validate the business model. You have the right product at the right price. Now, when I say right price, one of the areas that struggle with that is the SaaS models. They all want to charge $4.99 a month to use their SaaS model. But if you're doing a business SaaS model and that guy's making $100,000 a month off your SaaS model, why would you charge him $4.99? You could charge him $50,000 and he'd still be happy. He's still making $50,000 more than he would have. Okay, so make sure you have the right model. Not too cheap. Nobody wants to leave money on the table, but not too high that nobody will buy it. So the whole purpose of this is to validate you have the right product at the right price. And then finally, you have to be able to scale. You have to scale to this because the next milestone is pure revenue. That's your growth. That's when you're going to explode. So right now, the incubate the idea, I have a 6-week program that I do that when I roll out to the incubators that they adopt, and that's called Startup Academy. And we take an incubator and make sure they have all that in order. It's done, it's proved, it's demonstrated, and they're ready to go. The next one we call the Commercialization Academy. That's actually 4 weeks of training, of classroom and mentoring, but it's got an extended mentoring, which could go out as far as 12 months. What we're seeing now is most of them are doing it between 90 and 120 days. So what we do is we stay on board and we work with the startups and have weekly staff meetings with them, answer their questions, bring the experience to the table, make sure they're staying on track, basically be an adult and a project manager.
Yep. So when you say project manager, do you really have like a project plan and you track down?
Oh, you got that before you leave step 1. You have a plan in step 1. What you do in step 2 is you'll take that plan and you'll break it down to a 30, 60, 90 day executable.
Yep. So what I'm
measure you against that, absolutely.
what I'm curious, is execution is one of the biggest reason of failure, right?
Absolutely.
Not being able to deliver the plan. So what are the mitigation plans that you put in place, or you recommend the teams to put in place to make sure they stick to the plan, that they have the right people, maybe even to be execution driven, and stick to
Sure.
it takes some skills, right? To
Yes, it does. Actually, it really doesn't take skills. It takes experience.
Yes.
So that's why us people with a little bit of gray hair, that's why we can make you guys successful and more people successful, just because we have the experience of done it. So the key to my approach is the hands-on.
Yep.
So we do there once a week. If you're slipping off your schedule, we beat you up. We report you back to the incubator or whoever you're working with and say, hey, these guys aren't doing it. And you can get kicked out and be done, and they take your money away.
Yep.
So there's incentive.
I think that's a good incentive, to keep moving. Yeah.
It is. So, and the secret to it is just being there. Because if I go and tell an entrepreneur to build a 5-year cost model, if I come back in a week, it's still blank because they've never done it before. They have no clue what's that mean.
Yep. And I can completely see the value to this, because seeing some entrepreneurs myself, they tend to not have that person behind them pushing them to move quickly, move faster, and keep the schedule.
Exactly. So our model that we roll out to the accelerators is, we call it a 10-20-70. So 10% is preparation, 20% is classroom, and 70% is hands-on mentoring. So we sit down with you and build your cost model, sit in the chair right next to you.
Yep.
So that's how that works. So those are the two distinct phases. Now let's look at that. Go ahead.
So maybe a quick question. So do you guys take a percentage in the equity as you guys do this, or how does
Right now we don't. We get paid good money from the accelerators, which is one of the reasons I like rolling it out in places like Qatar and Dubai.
Yep.
We get a lot of money. So they pay for it. But eventually the incubators and stuff take it. So we don't. Personally, we just charge full consulting rates to the incubator.
Yep.
Now, we might negotiate something with them, but traditionally we don't.
And I can completely see, the value that all this brings, because it's known that it's not easy to launch a startup, but then also the return, the job it creates, everything, that it yields behind all this, I think is a lot of value to any city, country, or corporation, to drive those things inside. It's really within today's, landscape. It's needed.
Exactly. It's just necessary. You just have to be there, and that's one of the reasons they like us, because we stay on board. We help them and make sure they have a better chance for success.
Right.
So now let's look at this from the life cycle. Where are you and what's important? So if you're looking at this chart here, you'll see over here you've got some terms you've seen. So let's just walk across it. So in the early stages, that's referred to as the seed stage, often referred to as bootstrapping. What that really means is you're paying for it. Okay? So this is the idea creation. This is when you formulate your idea, you build your MVP. So this is fundamentally phase one. Incubate the idea. You write your plans, you're making your MVP, you're trying to build a little bit of team, you're just trying to get going, and it's all on your money, friends and family, and so forth and so on. Eventually, you'll get to the point to where now you have an MVP, you're ready to go to the next phase, and you're going to go out and get some formal money. So you're probably going to go to an angel investor first for a small amount of money to get you started and go to market. And as we said earlier, to pass this milestone here, you have to have a strategy, a plan, and an MVP or a prototype. So any more today, that's expected.
So one question, let's imagine we have an entrepreneur listening to this webinar, and he hasn't the software expertise or the manufacturing hardware expertise. How can we get an MVP? Going to an incubator, or how does he find an MVP even outside of Silicon Valley? Because I know in the Silicon Valley might be a little easier. But
well, I don't know about that. If you're a good coder, you're employed.
Yep.
So that's a difficult. That gets back to that. One of the challenges we saw is building your team. Now, with that said, GLJ Group. So I'm the GLJ. My group are companies I have in my back pocket. So I've got access to 750 coders around the world. I've got manufacturing access. I have a team here that I stand up for building ecosystems. Everybody on my team has done this lots and lots and lots and lots. So it's a great question. It's probably one of the toughest things to get started is how to build your team.
Yep.
So really what you need to do is just understand what the options are and do it. And there's no real right answer to it. It is one of the challenges.
And then
obviously people do it all the time.
And then it comes back to the ecosystem, right?
Correct. And that's where innovation centers and ecosystems come in handy. So if you get into an incubator, then you'll probably have some of that access to some of those resources that will help you do that.
So maybe for that entrepreneur listening to this webinar, if you don't have the right ecosystem, call Gary to come and implement it in your city or country, and then you'll have the resources that you need.
There you go. Perfect idea. So yeah. So okay. So now to keep going. So now you've gone through, got your idea, got your MVP, got your plan, and you got your angel funding. The primary thing you're looking for the angel funding is to pay the 12 months or so of market entry for you to validate the product and validate the pricing. Now that's usually referred to as early stage funding. Sometimes there's a blending between this and seed and early stage, but fundamentally we'll call that early stage now. That purpose is to go to market, make sure you have the right product, the right price. Now, to come out of that milestone, you've got to have a product, revenue, right product, right price. Because now you're going to go to get VC funding. So now you might be asking for your 5 or 10 or 12 or $15 million, which is going to take you to the growth. And that's commonly referred to as Series A, or what I call as the alphabet series. Series A, Series B, Series C, that kind of thing. So the Series A, when you go to a VC, the whole purpose is to go to that $60, $100 million, or to get enough people in you that you get acquired. So in this space right in here is probably where you'll either be acquired or you're going to go for some more funding, which is still VC. VC and institutional funding are one and the same in most cases. But by the time you get to your A, B, C round, you're definitely getting into your institutional funding. There's no more angels providing cash at that point. And then after that, you're going to either go to IPO, get acquired, whatever the case may be, if it hasn't happened by then. So that's the model. So it's important to understand how to work your way through this process. You cannot jump from seed stage to Series A. I get that a lot. I work with a lot of companies that say, well, how much money do you need? Oh, I need $2.5 million. I say, well, but nobody's going to do that. You haven't met the criteria to go to a VC yet. So now you have to have a funding strategy that says, how do I get from where I am to here, to here, to here, so I can go out and get my $20 million VC funding?
Yep.
So that's how you have to understand where you are, what's important, and how you get there. So one of the other things we talked a little bit. So with what I'm looking at and what I'm seeing here in the Valley and other places I go to, one of the real popular things. So right now, obviously, cybersecurity is big. Seeing a lot of activity in virtual and augmented reality. And augmented and virtual reality is now becoming very similar to what happened in the early days of social, like Twitter and Facebook. Yeah, virtual and augmented reality is coming, but not everybody knows how to make money out of it yet. Sure, we can do games and sell games. Yeah, we can sell hardware and gear, Samsung gears and all these kind of things, but they don't really know how to make money out of it yet. So there's going to be a little bit of squishiness to figure out how to do it. I suspect you're going to see augmented reality being a great way for local targeted marketing.
Yep.
Where they reach out and touch you while you're playing with your augmented reality and it doesn't feel like spam.
Yep.
Another area I'm seeing is a lot of stuff in the transportation automotive stuff. Uber models, connected car, how do I operate without owning a car? How do I get from point A to point B? Apps that allow me to say, oh, here's the train, this bus, that taxi, this Uber, that boom gets me to where I'm going and back. A lot of stuff in that arena. I'm seeing some interesting stuff in search. Really, really complex and really advanced search engines that go way beyond what Google and these guys do. Another area that's starting to finally catch up is the agriculture and food delivery. I'm seeing a lot of activity there. We're still a little questioning whether or not you can produce Google-sized companies out of the ag and food delivery marketplace, but I'm seeing a lot of activity. Another one is manufacturing technology. A lot of that is geared around 3D printing. And then, of course, you have the usual cast of characters that are always there. Wearables, medical devices, B2B, enterprise, targeted marketing, big data, tech. those don't ever go away. They're always there. So those are what I'm seeing in the area of tech areas that seem to be relatively hot right now. It's not an exhaustive list, but those are the ones that jump to my mind instantly.
Yep. And so from the companies, you help on a day-to-day, what sectors do they touch in general? Do you have a preference in market preference?
No. As South Valley Angels is for investment. We invest in a wide range of things. What we don't invest in is we don't invest in social, we don't invest in enterprise software, and we don't invest in pure tech for tech.
Okay.
But a lot of folks do. Now, as far as GLJ Group, I work with, there's no vertical I don't work with. I've worked with all of them, because at the end of the day, Smart Business 101 doesn't matter what vertical you're in. The fundamentals are the same. There's tools and different aspects and go-to-market strategies that are different for different verticals. But the idea of applying best practices and being a smart CEO and running a smart company don't change. They haven't changed for 100 years.
Yep.
So we covered on both sides from that perspective.
Great. So we have some questions coming in here.
Perfect. We're at questions.
So perfect timing. So thanks, Gary. This was very insightful, and I was not expecting less. I've seen you in action, as I had mentioned.
But we only got an hour, so we can only do so much.
Yes. Thank you. So what would be your advice to a money remittance startup looking for funding right now? So angels versus crowdfunding. So
you say a money remittance problem. So it's an application for money remittance. So I would say, because you're a software, crowdfunding through a Kickstarter is probably not going to work. I'd have to look at what it is you're doing exactly, but probably not likely. So you could go to crowdfunding. FinTech is also an area that's relatively large and growing. I didn't have that on my list. I probably should have, now that I think about it. But FinTech is big, so there's a lot of activity out there. It really matters on where you are. If you have an MVP, then you pretty much have to go to angel investors first. If you don't have an MVP, you have to get that. So it's kind of a loaded question. You still have to go down the process: bootstrap, angel, and then VC. And so it depends not so much what space you're in, but where you are. What's your traction as a company?
And would a prototype be enough if it's not an MVP? It's another question.
Yeah. So normally we use MVP in software and prototype in hardware. So yeah, a prototype that shows that what you're trying to do functions. That's the biggest thing. You're not trying to defeat physics.
Yep. So then another question here. So on the entrepreneurs that you see, are they mostly engineers or also people without any, science or technological background? What's the pie chart? What would be the sort of ratio?
Absolutely. Sure. There's definitely trends. So if you're coming from the hardware side, 99.9% it's an engineer. They've invented something.
Yep.
Okay. On the software side, it's mixed. I would say maybe 60% business and 40% technical.
Okay.
So the software side, frequently what happens is you'll have a business person who says, I've been working in this space for 20 years and I know we can make this better. There's significant problems here. So then they'll go out and try to find coders and say, hey, here's what we need to do. They'll team up and do it. In many cases, it'll happen the same way. There'll be somebody who's a coder who knows there's a problem in their companies that they work at, and then they'll go and write a platform for that. They'll write something for it. So the software world, it's much more, it's more spread. But I work with a lot of business people that have the problem and try to find people to write the code. But it does go both ways.
Okay. So another question came up here via text. So what's the best way to approach a venture capitalist? How to meet even a venture capitalist?
Okay. Well, it somewhat depends where you live. So here in the Silicon Valley, which we have a lot of advantages, here in the Silicon Valley, there are events every single night, probably a dozen of them. And so what I tell people here to do is, if you live in a city, New York, Chicago, Silicon Valley, LA, places like that have a little more mature ecosystem, then you probably hold things like meetups and various other kind of activities and events that go all on the time. So what I tell people to do is stay away from the networking events. Go to events that say things like investor panel. At least then when you know there's going to be at least one investor there. He's on the panel. There's probably going to be 3 or 4 or 5. So you go to these events for one reason and one reason only, to get their business card.
Yeah.
So walk in, shake their hand, get their business card, and you can then leave. And then you do that as often as you can. Eventually, you'll get a stack of business cards. Now you can research those people, see what do they invest in, how do you want to approach them, what's going on, and you'll put them like any sales rep. You'll have an A, B, and a C category. So you start with your A investors first who look like a good fit. Then you can send out a very controlled email to them. If you live in an area, if you live outside of the area and you don't have anything like that, then your best bet is to probably be able to maybe go online and look at some of the crowdfunding angel lists in these kind of areas to see if that can work.
Great. So another question came up here. What are typically VC's attitude towards investing into niches that involve underdeveloped countries, like for instance, Haiti?
Okay, well, let's start with the big picture. Traditionally, and this is still the case, although a lot of us that are global are trying to change that, investors still like to draw a circle 100 miles around their office and they only invest in what's in that circle. So the mentality for investors is still local. And the reason for that is it's hard enough to manage a startup that's across the street, let alone one that's across an ocean.
Yep.
So in the undeveloped countries, there are folks that are focusing more on that. So what I try to do there is just take a look locally of what kind of organizations maybe that you can tap into. Most of the time what happens is people get on an airplane, they fly to the Silicon Valley and they say, hey, I want funding for Haiti. And we go, well, we don't fund but local. So the whole local thing is still difficult. It's growing and starting to change a little bit. So that's my bottom line, is you really try to focus local.
Okay, so in this case, I think it's a software development entrepreneur that is building a software here in Boston for Haiti. So it's a
okay, different environment. Then that's a different environment. All you have to, it doesn't matter where your product rolls out as long as you can show that there's a profitability for why you're doing it. Again, at the end of the day, investors don't invest to save the world. They invest to make money, period. Now, if they can save the world, hey, that's a nice Benny, but that's not what they're there for. So just make sure that you show the business case. If there's a business case, it doesn't matter where it's at. As long as you're local and they can grab a hold of you, you're good shape.
Yep. So final question. So what would you tell an entrepreneur? What would be your best advice right now for an entrepreneur listening to this webinar?
Okay.
And we'll use this as the closing question, unless you have anything you want to add before we end the webinar.
Okay, my one-liner is, you sell your product to customers, you sell your business case to investors, partners, and teammates. Investor, we can care squat about your product. We're never going to use it. We're going to never buy it. We don't care that you've got 35 features and all your competitors only have 20. What we want to know is, are you going to be successful as a business? Because the innovation highway was scattered with better products that failed and lost. So having the best product guarantees nothing. Having the best team probably guarantees some level of success.
Great. Thank you, Gary. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I hope this was kind of what you were looking for, so I hope everybody got something out of it.
Yes. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you very much, and have a great afternoon.